Hello, I'm Julia Zamiro. When I was in high school, I used to think I'm too young to have this many embarrassing memories. And that was even before Facebook was a thing. Sometimes I felt like a character in an American teen movie, but apparently I skipped the part in puberty where I get really attractive, my parents buy me a car, and everyone wants to be my best friend. My parents weren't mean, but let's face it, they probably were the kind of parents who would switch off the Wi-Fi at night. Sometimes being a teenager was awesome, but it was also stressful, humiliating, boring, frightening and hard. It wasn't until I got out of high school that I realised that at some point, high school sucks for everyone. Fortunately for me these days, the embarrassing memories of all the stupid things I did become great stories to tell on television. So, I've pulled together this group of people to share their teenage experiences and how they managed to survive high school, as well as clinical psychologist and family therapist Andrew Fuller, to give us some tips on exactly how to do that. So let's meet them. Ned, Ashley, Lauren and Habib. Andrew, what do we mean by mental health? It's such a broad term.
Well, mental health's really flexibility, I think. It's the flexibility to approach your life and have multiple ways of solving problems, multiple ways of connecting with people. So it's the relationships you have with other people. It's the relationship you have with the events in your life, which you can be flexible with. And it's also the relationship you have with yourself, I think, that idea of being prepared to regard yourself as someone of worth, someone of merit.
How does physical health play into that?
Well, physical health and mental health, of course, are incredibly interlinked. So partly by looking after our bodies, we can start to feel better about ourselves.
Now, we've got some teenagers here. I mean, just some of them. Some have already left school and are at uni, and some are still at school. That'll be you, Ned. What are some of the biggest issues teenagers face at school?
Well, I guess I experienced a lot of bullying and peer pressure, and I never really fit in with anyone, so a lot of the pressure on me was just trying to find enough social people to be around to have that sort of social element in my life, so I wasn't just studying all the time. So, and I guess parents also, like not everyone can have parents that, you know, are happy with whatever marks they get, and so they get pressure from their parents to get, you know, A+ all the time. And
Ned, what about you?
Teachers tend to put a lot of pressure on you when it comes to studying and focusing on your work, and it's kind of tough to do that because the pressure they put on you is it's too overwhelming, and you just can't take it.
When you've got each teacher saying, my subject's important, no, my subject's important, no, my subject's more important, is that something that you face as well, where every teacher thinks...
You have every teacher saying that.
Yeah.
Because every teacher, well, every teacher's important, they also want to feel important, so they're going to say that anyway.
They want to feel important.
Yeah.
That's a good one. What about you, Habib? What were the things that you remembered in adolescence that were particularly difficult?
Well, for me, I've been only here for 8 years in Australia, so when I came here, it was... From the start, it was very difficult because I had little knowledge about writing, reading or talking to people. The only words that I started learning was basically the F words from the start.
Right.
Which was a good start, but it got me somewhere, but...
But not everywhere.
Not exactly. No. As I moved into high school, it got really tough for me and my friends. There was only, I think, about 2 or 3 Afghans in my school, which is how I met, like, my best mates. Every lunch we used to get out and have fun, but the thing was that we were standing out like we were different from other people. But at the end of the day, my teachers in the school were supportive for us and everyone. And then we did learn through the hard way that, you know, there's other ways to deal with, you know, all the stuff that goes around the school.
What about dating? I didn't date anyone at high school. I want to make that completely clear. But is that still a stress in adolescence, that whole thing of wanting to go out with someone?
I guess I found at my school a lot of people were defining themselves by the relationships they were in. So a lot of people around me were like, oh, I can't, you know, go out. I don't have anyone to go with. I don't have a boyfriend to go out with. But I guess, yeah, it is a pressure because everyone's like, well, why don't you have a boyfriend? And
Ned, what about you?
I think because our school is an all-boys school,
Yep.
They tend to talk about girls a lot.
Right. Hormones, let's speak about them. Hormones. Do you feel it kicking in as an adolescent? Do you actually start going, I felt I was normal yesterday, today I'm going berserk?
you almost can. Like, it's not an instant thing, but you can tell over, like, a few months that you suddenly, you know, more, if you're a guy, probably more aggressive. I don't really know, I'm not a guy. But if you're a girl, yeah, I noticed that sort of I snap a bit easier and I was a bit more sort of, not aggressive, but, like, snarky is the word my parents have always used.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that I was noticing guys a bit more.
Hello, are you here?
He's a bit young for me.
Year 12 is a big stressful time.
Yeah.
How did you cope with Year 12, Ash?
I put a lot of pressure on myself to even make it through high school, and then when I finally got my score, and I wasn't entirely happy with it, but I knew I'd done my best, and because I'd pushed myself, and that pressure I put on myself, it was, yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure.
I made sure that I was sort of breaking away from my study every so often, taking a break, going out, talking to people, just, you know, relaxing as well as studying, because if you study the entire time, you're just going to end up stressed and overworked and you won't do your best. And yeah, I guess to just remember that your marks don't define you and that...
They certainly didn't define me in Year 12, I can tell you that. Let's not talk about maths. Ned, what about you? Because you're still there.
Yeah, I'm currently finishing Year 12. I am coping well with it, but yeah, they still tend to put a lot of pressure on me, but I sometimes tend to ignore it.
Good. Sometimes you've got to ignore. Lauren, what about you in terms of Year 12 stress? Yeah. How was Year 12 stress for you and your friends?
Year 12 actually wasn't that bad for me. I used Year 11 as a practice run, so Ned, I hope you used Year 11 as your practice run.
Let's say I did.
And I actually had a pretty good time. Don't forget to have fun.
Yeah, good.
And pace yourself and try your best, but don't kick yourself if you don't do as well as you would like, because there are so many ways to make it in this world. I went on a gap year after my Year 12, working full-time and volunteering for Young and Well. And I met so many people and I realised, you know, there's a whole world outside of school just waiting for you.
And there's always a back way or another way into a course you want. So like Deakin has, is it MIHT or MIT or something, and you do like a year through them and then you can get straight into a course you want. So there's no point worrying unnecessarily that you're not going to get straight into your course.
Yeah.
What are some things that can have a negative effect on your mental health?
Oh, life generally.
Life generally. This is the thing, if we could all just agree to that and go, life's hard, how do you deal with it? And there are the beautiful moments, but there are moments that need resilience and strength.
That's right. I reckon, you know, everyone really has tough moments. None of us escape without it. You know, all of us at some stage have to look in the mirror at ourselves and go, well, that's all I've got on offer, really. That's as good as it gets, pretty much. I could go to the gym, but really, am I going to change much about it? It's sort of about learning to kind of accept that sometimes life will have its ups and downs, and sometimes you just got to ride your way through it. But, you know, not like a passive person. You can kind of try and fix whatever you can, but gee, it's a bit of a hit and miss affair.
So this is a question for all of you. What are some of the times when the mental health of you or your friends wasn't so good?
So Year 10, when I was just adjusting to having depression, so my first year I was seeing, you know, a new counsellor, a new psychologist, it was up and down a bit. But Year 12 was definitely the worst when I hit VCE, and like all my friends were focusing on VCE too. So your friendship group doesn't break up, but you don't have quite as much time for each other. And I think a lot of my friends noticed, because I'm a very talkative person. Like, I will talk on and on and on in lunchtime, and they usually have to shut me up.
So they noticed
because
that you weren't?
I was pretty much silent.
Right.
All the way through lunchtimes, and they're like, something is wrong here. Like, one of my friends actually at one point dragged me to the counsellor's office and said, sit here and wait for her to come out and you were going to talk to her.
And you got through it. I mean, Year 12,
yeah.
What sort of help did you seek out?
So I think that year I was seeing Sarah, the psychologist, in school, but I was also seeing a psychologist out of school. Plus, my parents and my family was very, very supportive. Like, they were always, you know, making sure I was all right, but not pushing me to be all right, sort of thing.
Did you ever feel like, oh, I see someone at school, I see someone out of school? Was it all too much, or were you genuinely thinking, this is so important to do this because I feel like I'm getting some peace of mind, if nothing else?
At the start, I refused to admit that I needed, like, even though I was seeing the counsellor every week, I refused to admit that I actually needed that. And I think middle of Year 12 was when I realised that, hang on, I actually need help with this and I need to put in the effort. And I was putting in so much effort then with my depression and my work. And so it really did make me feel a lot better putting the effort in. And I guess it was also realising that it was okay for me to need help was the big part of me actually seeking help.
It can be that simple, can't it, Andrew, to look out for your friends and sort of say, are you all right?
Yeah, that's right. I think that's what a great friend does, isn't it, really, for us? And just sometimes by calling it out and saying, are you okay? Or, you know, do you need to talk about something? Sometimes we just pause and stop in our tracks and go, actually, maybe I do.
Yeah.
It's sort of like your slow realisation that actually getting some help actually was going to be helpful, which was kind of an extraordinary kind of insight for you to finally get, you know.
Definitely.
Probably after that poor counsellor who spent weeks with you struggling away, you know. But I'm sure, you know, people are generally kind of good-hearted about those things when they make those comments. Yeah.
Lauren, you actually had a friend who was ill, or you saw her behaviour changing.
Yeah.
And then you did something about it, and that's a very tough call, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how did that kind of pan out for you?
Well, at the beginning it was tricky because we didn't know what it was. So she had borderline personality disorder, still has it, and I didn't know, like, my boundaries, I suppose, as a friend.
So sometimes the problems in adolescence is actually, it's not happening to you necessarily, it's happening to a really good friend.
Yeah.
And you can't ignore it.
I can't actually pick a particular point in which I thought something is wrong, but the way that my friend interacted with other people was difficult in that she would confide in us, and sometimes this was all pretty serious stuff. Then there was nothing that we could do to help her, and she would have very intense relationships. So she would think that you were her best friend, or she hated you. And we could tell that she was experiencing some really intense emotions, and quite often they were laid onto us. We copped a lot of it. And there wasn't much communication with the teachers.
So at what point did you think, is it up to us to say something? Like, we have all this information, but should we tell anyone? Should we share it?
Yeah. A few months in, we decided we have to meet with the counsellor, tell her what's going on. And we did, and that made things a lot easier, and even easier when the school hired a psychologist.
That made the difference.
That made a huge difference because the psychologist had experience with similar situations.
And you can't be expected to deal with that, obviously.
No.
But you're the one who kind of set off the alarm bell, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all these things we've talked about, the stresses you can feel as an adolescent, how do these things affect our mental health?
Oh, well, enormously. I think, I mean, the sort of pressures that you can put on yourself, the sort of idea that somehow you've got to conform to some perfect body type for a while and, you know, work out in the gym and kind of fit in with the cool kids. Often teenagers aren't much good at looking out for themselves. They kind of believe whatever's going on right now is the thing, you know, and you've got to believe that entirely. And so if somebody says something rotten to you, as people do from time to time, you kind of, wow, that's true, that's about me, you know, I've got the wrong body shape or weird stuff. And so you can kind of spend a lot of time as a teenager tormenting yourself on the basis of what people have offloaded because they themselves are feeling bad about themselves, and so it's easier to kind of put you down, you know, and feel better about myself. You know, it's kind of crazy.
So what can you do to improve your own mental health?
The way I like to think about improving your mental health is about optimal growing conditions. If you've ever been to a garden nursery and you've seen those plants, and the plants sort of come with a little plastic kind of sleeve. It'll say something like, I don't know, if you plant this plant in a bit of shade and give it lots of water, it's going to flourish, it'll grow. Now, all of us have our own optimal growing conditions. We have the sort of conditions under which we thrive best. And it takes a while to kind of think about those and then to think about, well, how do I, as much as possible, put those situations or those circumstances around me? See, for some of us, we really like to be busy as, you know, and do all sorts of things. Other people like times of quiet. Some people like to be physically really active. Other people like to have more rest. It's okay, it's, you know, you like what you like. And it really takes a bit of thinking to think about how do I specify and, you know, really gather those optimal growing conditions. Now, most people never get to that. They sort of just react to life. So as life sort of comes and biffs them on the nose and gives them situations to deal with, they kind of just deal with it and never think, well, how do I step back from that for a bit and find my own optimal growing conditions. So it might be worth kind of finding out what they reckon they might be.
I think I've got about 4 things in my optimal growing conditions, and one of them's a lot of sleep, I can tell you that. Ash, what about you?
Take breaks while you're studying is definitely a huge one. So every 50 minutes, take a 10-minute break. Get away from your studying is definitely a way to sort of bring you up.
What about you, Lauren?
There's one thing that I wish that I had done at school, and I can really recommend mindfulness meditation.
Oh, tell us about that.
So I've been trying to do that every day for about 2 months, and it really helped me to get through the Christmas period in retail because I was working in a bookstore.
I'll say.
Yeah, it really helped me to stay calm during stressful situations, and it gave me a bit of a break as well. But while I was at school, I actually rode my bike to school every day.
So exercise again.
Exercise, definitely.
Yeah. And concentrating, because a bike on a road, you can't just, tune out. You've really got to see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing friends as well also is a good stress reliever. So don't miss that party just because you have a SAC or an assessment on Monday
don't
morning.
worry, I'm not missing out at all.
I have a feeling Ned wouldn't at all.
One of the things I find that I often suggest to people that I work with, and it's often really useful, is to create 2 playlists of songs. And one playlist is the real pump-up songs.
I love that.
The one you really get... Well, of course you do. I've seen you on that show. That other show.
That other show.
Yeah. And so the real pump-up ones. But then there's another playlist you create, which is the sort of bruised by life songs. You know those ones you're having one of those moments and it's a tough day and you kind of want to hear a song that somebody else in existence has also shared this kind of feeling and they've felt a bit hurt and battered by life. And so often it's good to listen to that sort of sad playlist first and then kind of go, right, OK, I've got enough of that and now I need to get the kind of, that kind of music that kind of just bumps you up.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole show in that and probably about 9 apps as well.
Yes.
You could probably...
There is actually an app for that someone called Stoyan Stoyanov is developing at the moment.
Oh, loving it. All right, final question. Now, we know, or maybe we don't, but you're not alone in having to deal with all of this. So who can you go to for help?
Anyone, pretty much. Like, I went to see my GP when I first realised that something... Mum took me to the GP and, like, they will help you and they will talk you through everything. They'll tell you what's going on. Yeah, just anyone around you can talk to.
One of the things that, of course, got to be a bit careful of, because often we first go to our friends, but sometimes our friends are dealing with the same crap that we're dealing with. They've got no idea how to deal with it either. Yeah.
At school, Ned, who would you go to if you had to ask for help?
I honestly am very thankful to have a few people to go to. I have a lot of teachers, a couple of friends. I even talk to my mum. Mum's a great person. She's the best person to talk to.
It's amazing. That's great. Because they're the parents, and you'd think that'd be easy, but it's not.
No, it's not.
But you get on really well with your mum and you can have that conversation.
And once you actually have that first conversation with her, even if it's kind of nerve-wracking to talk about, she's like the perfect person to understand and is always there for you.
What about you, Habib?
No, my school, really supportive school. I like all my teachers except one.
Got to be one.
Yeah.
And name them now. No, obviously not. Don't name them.
But the thing with my teachers were in the class, if I wasn't feeling that good or my mate wasn't there, I used to just check them and be like, sorry, miss or sir, that this thing happened. I won't be at class. Can you email me that? And they used to just, when I go to the next day of school, they used to just get me out of class and just like, everything's all right. And the good thing with my teachers were that, like, towards the end, they help me as much as they can, and then they're like, sorry, it's out of my capacity. I can't help you anymore. I'll point you to the right direction. And then they even got me someone that can help me out, and so is everyone else. That it's the thing. It's just you need to have a great bond. You just need to find that right person, and then it makes it way easier for anyone. Yeah.
And just to add to that, there are a lot of resources out there that are online or are apps, and you can talk to a counsellor through email or instant message if you're not comfortable talking to someone face-to-face.
And finally, Andrew, how do you know when you need help? Because Ash has been very brave in saying she didn't even know.
Yeah.
And then she went, I don't need any help. And we've all done that. You know, I've been to counsellors too, and you kind of go, I don't need to go there. And then you realise, no, you really needed to talk. How do you know?
I think when you get into loopy thinking, when you kind of find yourself dwelling on the same issue and it's going around and around and around your head and you're thinking, hang on, I thought about this yesterday and the day before that and the day before that, and you go, I'm not getting anywhere. And then you just realise you need another brain. You need somebody who sees life differently, whether it's your mum or whether it's a psychologist or whether it's a teacher or a literature teacher, whoever it is, basically who can kind of give you a different slant on it and shift you out of that loop, because we all think loopily from time to time.
I guess it is sometimes hard with like that because everyone does experience it differently. So I guess it's just asking, you know, yourself whether you feel like you're still the same or whether you feel different. And it's having, I mean, I know it's hard to admit to yourself that you've got a problem because I've been through that. But yeah, once you realise that something might be a bit off, you just got to try and tell yourself that, yes, you do need this help and it doesn't make you any less of a person to need the help.
Lovely note to end on. Thank you, Ash. And in the meantime, start making those playlists.